Hi friends, continuing with the neurology series, today we will talk about dementia. You can download the PDF of this lecture from the MediLectures app. You can also attempt a free test on dementia on the app as well. In this lecture, we'll first see the intro, then what are the causes of dementia, how to approach a patient in the form of history, examination, cognitive and neuropsychiatric testing as well as laboratory test. Finally, what all treatment options are available for these patients. So friends, talking about the definition, dementia is defined as the acquired deterioration in the cognitive abilities that impairs the successful performance of activities of daily living. So the most common modality which is lost in dementia is episodic memory. That is the ability to recall events specific in time and place. When we consider the other modalities which are lost, these include language, visuospatial orientation, calculation, judgment, problem solving abilities, as well as neuropsychiatric and social deficits like depression, apathy, anxiety. Now, clinical course can be slowly progressive as in Alzheimer's disease, static as in anoxic encephalopathy, or fluctuating from hour to days in dementia with Lewy bodies. Now, it is a very important point that most patients with Alzheimer's disease begin with episodic memory impairment, which we have already seen that the most common modality lost is episodic memory. On the other hand, in frontotemporal dementia, which is the most common dementia in less than 65 year of age group, memory loss is not a typical presenting feature. These will present with other features which we will discuss later in this presentation. Now let's come to the functional anatomy of dementia. First of all, the pathways in our body which are responsible for control of behavior, mood and attention include ascending noradrenergic pathways, serotonergic pathways and dopaminergic pathways. On the other hand, the pathways which are responsible for attention and memory are cholinergic pathways. Now, when we consider the pathology in various types of dementias, the Alzheimer's disease, which is characterized by episodic memory loss initially, begins in the entorhinal cortex, which is a part of medial temporal lobe. Then the pathology includes hippocampus and finally also involves the temporal and parietal neocortex. On the other hand, vascular dementia is due to focal damage in variable network of cortical as well as subcortical regions. Finally, the frontotemporal dementia as well as Huntington's disease, which involves difficulties with judgment, mood, executive control, movement and behavior, begins with frontal or subcortical regions. Now let's see certain lesions in the pathways and what are its effects. Now whenever there is damage to either caudate nucleus or its connection with dorsolateral prefrontal cortex or the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex itself, it leads to executive dysfunction. Now this executive dysfunction is characterized by poor organization and planning, decreased cognitive flexibility as well as impaired working memory. Now whenever there is damage to lateral orbital frontal cortex or ventromedial part of caudate nucleus, this leads to impulsiveness, distractibility and disinhibition. And finally, when there is damage to anterior cingulate cortex or medial prefrontal cortex or its connection with nucleus accumbens, then it leads to apathy, poverty of speech, emotional blunting and finally akinetic mutism. Now coming on to the causes of dementia. So first of all, the single strongest risk factor for dementia is increasing age. This is the single strongest risk factor. Now when we consider the common causes of dementia, the most common cause of dementia in Western countries is Alzheimer's disease, followed by vascular dementia. So this vascular dementia can be multi-infarct dementia or can involve diffuse white matter, which is known as Binswanger's dementia. Now, when we consider age group less than 65, the most common cause is frontotemporal dementia. When we talk of reversible causes, these include most commonly alcoholism and drug or medication intoxication. Now, Parkinson disease dementia. In this, the patients of Parkinsonism may develop dementia years after the onset of Parkinsonism. Also, there is variant which is known as Lewy body dementia, characterized by deposition of Lewy bodies. In this, dementia is present in preceding motor symptom patients. So since we are discussing reversible causes as well, out of all the patients of dementia, 19% are reversible. And when we consider the most common causes of reversible dementia, these include alcohol, depression. Depression is also considered as pseudo dementia. And third one is normal pressure hydrocephalus. So these all are reversible causes of dementia, most common reversible causes of dementia, and also drug and medication intoxication is included in this category. Now let's discuss some less common causes which will include both reversible as well as irreversible causes of dementia. So firstly we have vitamin deficiencies. So the deficiency of vitamin B1 is known as Wernicke's encephalopathy if it is causing dementia. Deficiency of B12 can lead to subacute combined degeneration, and deficiency of B3, that is niacin, can lead to pellagra, which is characterized by diarrhea, dementia, and finally death of the patient. Along with the vitamin deficiencies, endocrine disorders also are a reversible cause of dementia, which include hypothyroidism, adrenal insufficiency, Cushing syndrome, hypo or hyperparathyroidism, and finally renal failure, liver failure, or pulmonary failure. The infectious causes of dementia include HIV, neurosyphilis, papovirus, tuberculosis, fungal or protozoal infections, as well as Whipple's disease. Now the causes leading to head trauma and diffuse brain damage can be chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is commonly seen in boxers, chronic subdural hematoma, post-anoxia, post-encephalitis, and normal pressure hydrocephalus, which is one of the most common causes of reversible dementia. There can be intracranial hypotension. The neoplastic disorders include primary brain tumors or metastatic brain tumors. Toxic disorders include drug or medication overuse like narcotic overuse as well as heavy metal intoxication. Psychiatric disorders which can lead to dementia, these are also considered reversible. These include depression, which is known as pseudodementia, then schizophrenia, and finally conversion disorder. So these all psychiatric disorders can lead to dementia. Now the degenerative disorders include very important class which can be due to Huntington's disease, multisystem atrophy, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease which is caused by prions, and finally some other causes include sarcoidosis which can also lead to dementia, vasculitis, and Gardasil. Now when we discuss the course of dementia, most commonly the Alzheimer's disease, first of all let's see what is benign forgetfulness of elderly. Now this condition is very common in old age, and it is benign because it is not so progressive or serious that it impairs reasonably successful and productive daily functioning. So this is very common and present in almost all elderly individuals. But there is something known as mild cognitive impairment. This is cognitive problem that does not seriously disrupt the daily activities. But this mild cognitive impairment can progress to Alzheimer's disease, and the factors that predict the progression include prominent memory deficit, family history of dementia, presence of ApoE4 allele, small hippocampal volume in individuals, low CSF, A beta and high tau protein, and evidence of brain amyloid deposition on PET scan. So if these features are present, then it can definitely progress to Alzheimer's disease. Now let's see some common dementias, its molecular basis and pathologic findings. So in Alzheimer's disease, there is deposition of A beta amyloid and tau protein, leading to formation of amyloid plaques, neurofibrillary tangles and neuropil thread. In frontotemporal dementia, which includes the frontal as well as temporal lobe, there can be deposition of tau protein, TDP-43 and FUS. Now due to this tau protein, there are neuronal and glial inclusions. TDP-43 can also form neuronal and glial inclusions, and FUS can also form neuronal and glial inclusions. In dementia with Lewy bodies, there are presence of Lewy bodies which are nothing but inclusions formed of alpha synuclein. In Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is caused by prion, there is prion related protein SC. SC stands for Scrapie. So there is this deposition of prion related protein, and there is also panlaminar spongiosis. The Huntington's disease is characterized by deposition of Huntingtin protein and defect in Huntingtin gene. Now let's come to the approach to a patient who is presenting with dementia. First we will discuss the history, then examination, then neuropsychiatric and cognitive testing, and finally the laboratory test. So first of all, if there is acute or subacute onset of confusion, we should always suspect delirium, which should be differentiated from dementia. And we have to ideally search for any intoxication, infection or metabolic derangement which can lead to delirium. So in history, we will discuss according to the case scenario what is the history being provided and what is the most probable diagnosis according to that. So first of all, if the patient is presenting with episodic memory loss, difficulty in managing money, complaints like difficulty in driving, difficulty in finding words and navigation, the most probable diagnosis is none other than Alzheimer's disease. And it is very characteristic of these features which we have discussed. On the other hand, if someone is presenting who is less than 65 years of age with personality changes, disinhibition, weight gain, compulsive eating, apathy and loss of empathy for others, it is frontotemporal dementia. Early visual hallucinations, Parkinsonism history, REM behavior disorder and Capgras syndrome. This is a person thinks that a familial person has been replaced by an imposter. So these all are characteristic of Lewy body dementia. History of stroke and irregular stepwise progression of dementia is most probably due to vascular dementia. Rapid progression with motor rigidity and myoclonus, very important. It is seen in Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is a prion disease. Then seizures can be seen in stroke, that is vascular dementia, as well as neoplasms. Gait disturbance can be seen with vascular causes. Parkinson disease, dementia with Lewy bodies, and most importantly normal pressure hydrocephalus, which is a characteristic of triad of gait disturbance, urinary disturbances and dementia. If there is high risk sexual behavior individual or IV drug abuser, it should point towards infections like HIV or syphilis. These are sexually transmitted and can lead to dementia. Recurrent head trauma can lead to chronic SDH, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, intracranial hypotension or normal pressure hydrocephalus. Alcohol abuse can lead to malnutrition and vitamin B1, that is thiamine deficiency, leading to Wernicke's encephalopathy. History of veganism, bowel irradiation and chronic antihistaminic therapy for GERD can also lead to vitamin B12 deficiency. Finally, if there is some mood disorder, depressive signs, death of loved one, this can be pseudo dementia due to depression relative cognitive impairments. Also, one important thing is autosomal dominant family history can be seen along with Huntington's disease. So like we have discussed the history according to scenario, likewise we also discussed the examination. So in Alzheimer's disease, there is usually episodic memory loss and it will spare the motor system till late. So in examination, no motor system will be abnormal till late. In frontotemporal dementia, we can find axial rigidity, supranuclear gaze palsy as well as motor neuron disease. In Lewy body dementia, there can be new onset Parkinsonism, which can give the findings of resting tremors, rigidity, bradykinesia and fascinating gait. But usually this Lewy body dementia most commonly starts with visual hallucination and dementia rather than Parkinsonism. Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease is characterized by diffuse rigidity, akinetic mute state and myoclonus, which is startle sensitive. Vascular dementia as well as brain tumors can present with hemiparesis or other focal neurological deficits like seizures. Vitamin B12 deficiency can lead to myelopathy and peripheral neuropathy. Now, peripheral neuropathy can also be due to other vitamin deficiencies, heavy metal poisoning, thyroid dysfunction, Lyme disease as well as vasculitis. Now, to differentiate it from thyroid, in hypothyroid patients there is dry cool skin, hair loss and bradycardia, which is not present in vitamin B12 deficiency. Now coming on to the cognitive and neuropsychiatric testing, we have many tests available like mini mental score examination, Montreal cognitive assessment and Cognistat. So in MMSE there are total of 30 points which include orientation, language, attention, registration and recall. So here only let's discuss what is the earliest finding in different types of dementia. In Alzheimer's disease, the first finding which is lost is episodic memory. Along with that, category generation and visuoconstructive ability is also lost. In frontotemporal, executive function or language function is the first thing which is lost, that is speech or naming. In Parkinson disease or Lewy body dementia, visuospatial function is lost first. In vascular dementia, there is mixture of executive control and visuospatial deficits which are lost. Now let's see the laboratory test in detail. So we have divided the test in routine test, optional test and occasionally helpful. So routine which we have to do in every patient should be history, physical examination and thyroid function, vitamin B12, CBC, electrolyte, CT or MRI. Optionally, we can require psychometric testing, chest X-ray, lumbar puncture, LFT, RFT, urine toxin screen, HIV, apolipoprotein E and RPR or VDRL for syphilis. Occasionally, we can need EEG, parathyroid function, adrenal function, urine heavy metals, RBC sedimentation rate, angiogram, brain biopsy, SPECT, PET, and lab screen for autoantibodies. So let's discuss certain most important tests of all of these. First, let's discuss MRI brain, which is a very important test in dementia. So first of all, MRI brain can help us rule out primary as well as metastatic neoplasm. It can help us locate areas of infarct or inflammation. It can detect subdural hematoma, normal pressure hydrocephalus, and diffuse white matter disease. So we will now discuss what are the individual findings in the most common causes of dementia in the MRI brain. In Alzheimer's disease, we will see hippocampal atrophy. Since the first part which is involved is entorhinal cortex followed by hippocampus, hippocampal atrophy is characteristic of Alzheimer's disease. Also, there will be posterior predominant cortical atrophy. In dementia with Lewy bodies, amygdala is involved more than hippocampus. In Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, we have to do MRI with diffusion weighted images. So in this, there will be restricted diffusion within the cortical ribbon and basal ganglia. In vascular dementia, there will be extensive multifocal white matter abnormalities. In normal pressure hydrocephalus, we can see communicating hydrocephalus, vertex effacement, as well as gaping of sylvian fissures. Now, one which is left is frontotemporal dementia. In this, there will be focal frontal, insular, and or anterior temporal atrophy. So the importance of SPECT and PET scan will be, in cases of Alzheimer's disease and frontotemporal dementia, there will be temporoparietal hypoperfusion or hypometabolism. So there will be seen in Alzheimer's disease and frontotemporal dementia. Now let's come to amyloid imaging. So in amyloid imaging, we use Pittsburgh compound B or florbitapir, which is F18AV45. So these are radioligands which are used for detecting brain amyloid deposition associated with amyloid angiopathy or neurotic plaques of Alzheimer's disease. So this testing is very important for Alzheimer's disease. Now lumbar puncture is not done routinely, but it can be done if any CNS infection or inflammation is suspected, and in degenerative causes of dementia, we can check out the levels of CSF proteins like A beta and tau, which will be different in different dementias. So in Alzheimer's disease, there is characteristically low A beta 42 and increased tau protein. EEG is also not commonly used in evaluation of dementia, but it can be helpful in Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is characterized by a repetitive burst of diffuse high amplitude sharp waves and periodic complexity. Brain biopsy can occasionally help us diagnose vasculitis, certain neoplasms, and unusual infections. And MR angiography is useful for cerebral vasculitis or cerebral venous thrombosis. So this was all for laboratory investigation. So reading the summary is your homework. Just see this table, and it is a very important table. You can memorize each and every dementia by revising this table again and again. Now coming on to last but very important part of this presentation, that is treatment. So first of all, what are the major goals of treatment? First, we have to treat all the reversible causes, and second, we have to provide comfort and support to the patient and caregiver. Now, first of all, treat the underlying cause, whether it is due to any hormonal imbalance or vitamin deficiency or infection, we have to treat that underlying cause. Now the supportive treatment includes antidepressants like selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors and serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. So these have anxiolytic properties, and these can be considered in patients because dementia itself leads to depression and anxiety. Anticonvulsants should be used if a patient is having seizures. Antipsychotics, especially quetiapine, can be used in a patient of dementia in a dose of 12.5 to 25 milligram daily, and this will help the patient get relief from agitation, aggression and psychosis. Now coming on to the very important drug class, that is cholinesterase inhibitors. Since dementia is characterized by decreased acetylcholine in the brain, cholinesterase inhibitors is particularly useful. So in Alzheimer's disease we have rivastigmine, donepezil and galantamine, and in Parkinson's disease dementia we can use rivastigmine. Another drug which can be used is memantine. This is glutamate inhibitor, and it can be used in moderate to severe Alzheimer's disease. This will help decrease the burden of caregiver. This can help patient having dressing and grooming himself, and it should be combined to anticholinesterases. Now, non-drug behavior therapy is very important in patients of dementia. We have to make the life of patients comfortable by preparing the lists, schedules, calendars, labels, and giving them simple tasks so that they do not have to struggle in their life. Also, family members and caregivers play a very important role, and we have to take care that these family members and caregivers avoid frustration and depression, and we have to educate and counsel them regarding the dementia and its consequences.